Hello and welcome to another edition of the Leadership Download, where we break down a leadership subject in 20 minutes or less. My name is Travis Van Duzen, and I am here with my good friend Cameron Singh. And today we're going to talk about dealing with difficult employees. You know, in my management career and doing some consulting work, one of the things that I've realized in management is that it is an inevitable piece that as a manager that you will have difficult employees. You're going to have employees that don't agree with you, that you're going to have employees who don't want to cooperate with you. So in the beginning of my career, I thought maybe that was just something extra, but now I'm realizing that that's something that's just a part of being in management. You know, John Maxwell says 90% of the art of living consists of getting along with people that you don't understand.
Yeah, and leadership would be so much easier, the saying goes, if it wasn't for people. And topping off the list of difficult people to work with or lead is toxic people. Carey Nieuwhof, he's a public speaker and talks a lot about leadership. He mentions what you accomplish in leadership is often most powerfully shaped by what you allow into leadership. If you let toxic people in, you pay a staggering price. Your organization will only ever be as healthy as you are as a leader. The health of the leader tends to determine the health of the team. It's hard to have a healthy organization if you don't have a healthy leader. And it's so important, you know, we need to look at ourselves as the leader in the mirror and evaluate our best practices when it comes to hiring. We need to be as transparent as possible and constantly seek feedback, especially with new initiatives and roles that we have in our organizations and areas that we may lead in. And we need to rely on facts to educate others and figure out a way to work with each other to achieve the company's goals. Additionally, we need to be prepared whether the worst case scenario comes to pass or not. It's better to be safe than sorry. When you see someone at any level behave inappropriately, reinforce the company's expectations for conduct at work. And we need to act quickly and responsibly to lead them back on track and have the confidence to tackle those difficult conversations expeditiously before it gets out of hand. So Travis, what are some ways that we can deal with difficult employees?
Yeah, I like what you said there. You know, when it talks about, when you said that, dealing with difficult employees really starts with us as the leader, as the manager. You know, most of the time when we struggle to connect with an employee or we have a rebellious employee, we tend to want to place 100% of the blame on that person, and we don't want to take any ownership in trying to make that situation better. So really the number one way I think that we can begin to curve those issues with those troubled employees is to learn to listen. You know, most of the time when we encounter a difficult employee or maybe a difficult personality or someone that we just don't connect well with, we make a really dire mistake as managers and as leaders. Often what happens is we begin to push these people away and we close ourselves off from them. And what ends up happening is instead of trying to listen to them and understand what's going on in their world, we tend to push them further away in a state of avoidance. But the best managers are constantly attentive. They're always trying to figure out the best way they can help their employees. And that really starts with being able to listen. You know, in my career, some of the most difficult employees that I've ever had, really, I was really able to bridge the gap with them by truly listening to what their problems were, what was their current situation in their lives, and that made that relationship a little easier to connect with that person. So, Cameron, what's another way that we can connect with difficult people?
Well, yeah, I'd like to add on that. I mean, at step one with listening, you really, as the leader, use your emotional intelligence to touch the team member's emotion, because there are some things that may come up when you're listening that you may not have known as a leader, because of course, as leaders, we don't know everything that's going on in the work environment. So it's important to listen to see what the underlying reason is of why that employee is being so difficult. Could be something personal, could be something that we lost sight of. But the next one is giving clear and behavioral feedback. And this is so critical when it comes to dealing with difficult employees. And it's so important to separate the behavior from the person. Most managers will spend months, even years, complaining about poor employees and not ever giving them actual feedback. I've seen leaders throughout my tenure in the workforce, leaders talk trash about employees, but they never do anything to resolve the situation. And yes, giving tough feedback is so uncomfortable as a leader. That's something that I have to think twice about before going into that conversation. But once you do it, hopefully, if the individual listens and responds well, you'll get that return from that conversation, and hopefully that team member will improve. And with this, you also have to increase your tolerance. Just because someone can change doesn't mean someone will change. And that's where your leadership and discernment come in. One example that I can tell you from my experience is with the difficult employees, I spend a little bit more time with them, meaning getting to know them as an individual and find what the underlying reason is for their behavior, because there's always a reason. And Travis, what's next?
No, I kind of wanted to piggyback on that for a minute because one of the biggest mistakes I made early on in my management career, I can remember the very first manager job I had. I was kind of fearful to speak up against employees who were maybe not completing their task correctly, or their performance was not great, or maybe they had a difficult personality that was threatening to the team. And I remember this one particular situation that I let it just continue to build and to build and to build, and basically turned into this like massive snowball effect of eventually all of my frustration and even some of my anger came out all at once on this person. And I was ready to, launch this guy to the moon because I was so upset. But then when I went to HR, which brings us to our third point, the first question that frustrates almost every manager is the first question HR is going to ask you is this question: well, what documentation do you have? And that brings us to point number 3, is whenever you have significant problems with an employee, you need to write down the key points. I really can't stress this enough. I can't say enough about this. I can't count how many times that I've had coworkers and colleagues in different industries that have struggled with this exact issue. They have an employee who has not been performing well. They've been coaching them verbally, and finally the company and the employee and the manager have now reached a breaking point in which the employee is no longer being useful, or the employees overstayed their welcome, but we don't have any documentation on them. So as negative as that may sound, as a leader and as a manager, we really have to be prudent in that part of our leadership, as understanding good managers have good documentation, because ultimately a manager is there to protect the company first. And now we take care of our employees. We love on our employees, but we're also there to protect the company that we work for. And ultimately we have to do that through documentation.
Yeah, you make a good point with the documentation, because I've seen when I was moving up in the industry as a frontline employee, I saw situations that transpired and yet nothing could be done because it was never documented. So when I took that first step in leadership, I learned from one of my general managers in the past. He kept a little journal off to the side, and it was his documentation journal. So what he did was any conversation he had with an employee, but it was mainly coaching discussions, but every now and then you would see some positive discussions in there. He would keep track of little discussions that he had, little coaching sessions. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, if it came to a point where we would need to follow the company's protocol and disciplinary action, we would then proceed with that. But documentation is so critical, especially when you're working for, you're there to protect the organization.
Absolutely.
So our next point is another way to deal with difficult employees is being consistent. And you don't want to seem that you are favoring a difficult employee where you're trying to conform to their requirements and what their behavior is. You don't want to make it to seem to the rest of your team that you are displaying special treatment to the difficult team member. If you say you're not okay with a behavior, don't sometimes be okay with it. Employees look to see what you do more than what you say. And also setting the example, you following that as well. And then off to our next point, Travis.
Yeah, if I could add one thing to consistency is, when especially in the industry we're in the aviation, the aviation industry, where turnover is sometimes a challenge, right? So one of the things that I often struggled with, and I even struggle with now, is that sometimes I would be willing to compromise or not be maybe so not hold the highest standard because maybe we're short staffed, and letting that employee go at this point may inconvenience more than just me. It may inconvenience the whole team. But that importance of still holding to your, holding to the values and the goals of the company and the expectations is going to be huge, because what ends up happening is people observe that when that happens, and then they also can realize, when we're short staffed or when we don't have the employee base, well, then we don't have to be held accountable. So one of the decisions I had to make at one point in my career was, even if it hurts us, I have to still be consistent in, making sure that I hold everyone accountable to that same standard, no matter the circumstances. Which brings us to point number 5. This, it says set the consequences if things don't change. Reality is, that our goal in coaching and with documentation is, it's ultimately we want the employee to improve. That's our goal. I really want to say that it's important that these stages should never be from a malicious standpoint. Like, our goal should be consistently to want remediation and growth of that employee. But unfortunately, there's going to be times and there's going to be scenarios where we have to set those consequences. And we have to stand by them. So if we've given a person an objective to meet, and we've given a standard that they have to reach, and they don't reach that, then the consequences that have been laid out have to be followed through. You can't have the 3 strikes you're out, and then 8 strikes later the employee's still working in the company. It just simply sets a bad culture. So any thoughts on that, Cameron?
Yeah, and it's so important to, as we set consequences, focus on what they're doing well, because some of these difficult employees may be your strongest operational team members. I can name probably 90% of the difficult employees that I've encountered so far in my career have been the strongest people that on the team. But when we move forward in setting consequences, we want to make sure to keep it positive. That's there to help the individual improve, providing them opportunities for improvement. And it is our job as leaders to help coach them through that. I still believe you can turn this around. That statement means a lot to an individual, because you don't want an employee to lose hope, and then you don't want to lose a potential strong employee that could be an asset for your organization and team.
Absolutely. So jumping to number 6, we're talking about work. We need to learn to work through the company's process. So good managers hold out for improvement until the point when they actually decide to let the person go. and they make sure that they've dotted all their I's, crossed all their T's. So at this point, we have to follow the process that our company's laid out. So this can look different depending on who you work for, but I think it's just important that we understand that whatever our company culture is, whatever the company culture that you work in, and hopefully it's a positive culture, that you follow the structure that they've laid out for you. So whatever HR has put in place for your company, I think it's just really important that as we learn to deal with difficult employees, we also understand the process in which our companies want us to take. You want to take number 7?
Yeah, and you don't want to poison the well. That could really degrade the overall team. All too often, poor managers substitute bad-mouthing the problem employee to all rather than taking the steps, as mentioned earlier. No matter how difficult an employee may be, good managers don't trash talk to other employees. It creates an environment of distrust and backstabbing, and it pollutes others' perception of the person and makes you look weak and unprofessional. We're able to be a true leader is that you take some action and that you're doing something about the situation. And sometimes you may have to separate employment of that individual. We'll talk more about that towards the end, but sometimes just that person does not fit within the organization. You'll also want to look at your hiring practices as well, because not every organization has a different culture, and not every individual that you hire will fit into the culture of the team and the organization.
Absolutely. So, and really to kind of go right into that, we also have to manage our self-talk. So we have to manage, what are we telling ourselves about this employee? So, not everything we talk about is actually verbalized. So, I mean, obviously, when, as Cameron was talking about the poisoning of the well, there's nothing healthy about going to other employees and complaining about someone else's performance. There's nothing good that can come from that. There's no good results, but there's also no good results that can come from you having negative talk to yourself. So if you are in a coaching situation with an employee, or you're trying to remediate someone to improve their performance, but yet everything inside of you're talking to yourself and basically saying, "Oh man, this person's an idiot. There's no way they're going to be able to get this. There's no way they're going to be successful." Then really, I mean, we're already setting ourselves up for a failure, and also we're setting that employee up for a failure. So it's really important that we make sure that we're not using unhelpful positive talk to ourselves. So sometimes we can tell ourselves positive things that are really not helpful to our growth and to our performance as managers to lead. But also we got to make sure we're not unhelpfully talking negative to ourselves. So thinking prematurely about things and believing things about an employee, even if it's just to yourself, is ultimately you're not going to put your best effort forward in helping that employee to improve. Good managers take a fair witness stance, making sure that they say to themselves about the situation is as accurate as possible. So we want to make sure what we say to ourselves about others is truthful as possible.
Yeah, and to add on to this, you want to suppress your urge to quote unquote convert the team member. Dr. Henry Cloud, he's a famous leadership author, he mentions, so doesn't it make sense that everyone else would be like you and really care? Sure, if you lived on Mars, but this is planet Earth. We don't want to make everyone on our team like us as leaders. Everyone's going to be different, and it's all about how we manage our self-talk. And our final point, be courageous. Dealing with difficult employees is probably one of the most challenging things that I have personally experienced, and I know that Travis has experienced, and leaders everywhere in every organization, we have to deal with it. Managing people is one of the most difficult aspects of the job of being a leader. Don't make excuses and don't put it off. Where you get your greatest return is when you tackle a situation and a difficult employee head on, efficiently and effectively as you can. And stay in tune to it. It doesn't mean that you have a conversation with an employee one day and then meet with them again a month later. Keep talking to that individual. Keep getting feedback from your other leaders that may happen to be on the team. And if, hallelujah, things turn around, be courageous to accept that. And hopefully the team responds well to that. And sometimes being proved wrong when we think someone's not salvageable is almost as hard as being proved right. I've seen throughout my early days when I was just learning how to be a leader and leading a group of individuals, just spending time with team members that were difficult and putting in that time, coaching them, and then you see them turn around. And the greatest reward is seeing a team member start out being your most difficult employee to your biggest asset that you rely on a day-to-day basis. And eventually, hopefully, they grow into a leadership role.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, just kind of closing my closing thoughts, as we wrap this up, I guess one of my greatest lessons learned and one of the things that I do in my my management today and my leadership today is learning how to do like instantaneous feedback. I think this is the most positive way to be able to lead your team, not just the employees that are struggling, but also employees that are doing well. Being able to provide instant feedback. So, if I'm out on the field at work and I see someone performing well, I don't wait 2 or 3 days to go talk to that person. I go and instantly praise them while they're doing that task. Or if I see someone failing to reach their potential, or I've seen if there's an ongoing issue, then I address it while it's happening. Don't wait till after. There's nothing worse than having that conversation with an employee and you're saying, well, you remember 2 weeks ago, I saw you do this. And they're like, oh, I don't remember. Well, of course they don't remember. So when we do it intentionally in the moment, there's number one, there's no deniability. But number two, it's in that moment, so it's a little bit more memorable to them the next time they go through the task. But at the end of the day, try to leave everything on a positive note. Cameron, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah. So there'll be times if you as a leader are not seeing results and you're dealing with difficult employees, and most likely it's more than one. We need to check ourselves to ensure that if we're providing the proper expectations for our team. I remember I learned from a general manager that our job as leaders is to provide the proper expectations and tools to perform the job well. And if we as leaders don't provide this, it is our fault of a team member shortfall. If we provide the proper expectations and resources and team members still fall short, it is up to us as leaders to hold them accountable and improve. This is never going to go away. We're always going to deal with difficult employees day in and day out. There'll always be issues. There'll always be problems. That's why they have us as leaders. Otherwise, there wouldn't be any leaders. And we have to, just like the 9 points that we mentioned, be courageous. That's main point as leaders. Be courageous. Travis, anything else to add?
No, I just want to say, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you guys next week on the Leadership Download. You guys have a great night.